හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Saturday the 2nd of December 2023. High-level meetings. President invites the French president to join Sri Lanka's International Climate Change University initiative. Time to review. The IMF Executive Board to consider the first review of the extended fund facility arrangement of Sri Lanka on the 12th of December. Way forward. Central Bank Governor highlights the need for harsh and unpopular decisions to preserve the country's democracy.
Central Bank and government may need to undertake harsh and unpopular measures that will ensure the democracy is preserved under the even going forward.
Understanding taxes. Although tax proposals set out in Budget 2024 may discourage investments in the short run, it is essential to induce growth in the long run, says economist.
I can see a much more serious aspect that has to be addressed to achieve this. That is corruption by the government, political levels as well as bureaucratic levels.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana First at 9. I'm AdaDerana joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now in your top story tonight, we take you to the latest in the United Arab Emirates. Now on the sidelines of COP28, President Ranil Wickremesinghe held bilateral talks with French President Emmanuel Macron and invited him to join the International Climate Change University initiative. President Wickremesinghe also met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as Prime Minister of Greece Kyriakos Mitsotakis on the sidelines of the conference in Dubai. Furthermore, President Wickremesinghe met with the Maldivian President Dr. Mohamed Muizzu and held discussions on the avenues to bolster relations based on mutual respect and shared values. The 28th edition of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP28, is currently underway in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. On the sidelines of the conference held in Expo City, Dubai, President Ranil Wickremesinghe engaged in bilateral talks with the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis. According to the President's media division, the discussions primarily focused on fostering close relations between the two countries. The PMD added that President Wickremesinghe extended an invitation to Prime Minister Mitsotakis to make an official visit to Sri Lanka in the near future. President Ranil Wickremesinghe also met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi yesterday. The encounter occurred during the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Dubai as well. Meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe also met French President Emmanuel Macron and engaged in bilateral talks on the sidelines of COP28. The President's media division highlighted that discussions focused on green transition of Sri Lanka's economy as well as strengthening France's engagement with the Indian Ocean Rim Association. The PMD further reported that President Ranil Wickremesinghe also invited the French President to join the International Climate Change University initiative. On the sidelines of COP28, President Ranil Wickremesinghe met with the President of the Maldives, Dr. Mohamed Muizzu, in the United Arab Emirates. During the meeting, the duo held discussions on long and historic relations between the two countries and explored avenues to bolster relations based on mutual respect and shared values. According to the President's Office of the Maldives, avenues of bolstering bilateral relations include people-to-people relations as well as cooperation in tourism. The two leaders also discussed the climate change policies and adaptation efforts of the two nations. The Maldivian President's Office added that both leaders expressed confidence in addressing challenges and seizing opportunities through collaborative efforts. Now, following more news on the sidelines of COP28, expressing his views on the green initiatives of the country, President Ranil Wickremesinghe unveiled plans to speed up the net zero campaign from 2050 to 2040, adding that the green investments could further propel the GDP of the country. During an interview on Bloomberg TV on the sidelines of COP28, in the United Arab Emirates, the President further highlighted the availability of excess solar and wind energy in the country and added that negotiations are currently underway to export renewable energy to other neighboring countries.
What are some of your green initiatives?
Well, our greening initiatives will start with encouragement of the renewable energy. Sri Lanka has, I think, have about 100 gigawatts finally of solar wind power available, which is far more than our needs. So it's a question of investing, and the investors will be able to, at some stage, export it, either in the form of green hydrogen or into India. We are having energy connectivity with India. So this is just a start.
And Mr. President, is it easy to find that capital? Are investors happy to come into Sri Lanka and give you some of what's needed?
Yes, once we start, which we have already done with 2 or 3 investors we are negotiating, other will come in. I think there is hunger for good investment, and especially a country like Sri Lanka, where we'll have excess energy available.
You mentioned a couple of things, also looking at exporting, possibly to some of your neighborhood. How quickly could that come, that you're doing so much green energy?
It will take a bit of time. We have started the connectivity. We just agreed on it a few months ago, and India will have a big demand. I mean, there's already Bangladesh, Bhutan and Nepal are connected to India. So that's one. But then we find we will have sufficient even for other purposes.
Sri Lanka also has its economic challenges. So by getting green investment, could that propel actually GDP and also labor?
It will certainly help us with the GDP, but it's a commitment that we get to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Actually, Sri Lanka is also planning to speed up its net zero campaign from 2050 to 2040.
Now, meanwhile, the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund is set to consider the first review of the 48-month extended fund facility arrangement for Sri Lanka on the 12th of December. This development came a few days after the official creditor committee comprising of India, Japan and France agreed to restructure approximately $5.9 billion of Sri Lanka's outstanding public debt.
The Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund is set to consider the first review of the 48-month extended fund facility arrangement for Sri Lanka on the 12th of December. This was revealed on the Global Lenders Executive Board's calendar, which mentioned that the first review of Sri Lanka's extended arrangement, request for waiver of non-observance of performance criterion, request for modification of performance criteria, financing reassurances review, and refacing of access are scheduled to go for consideration on the 12th of December. On the 29th of November, the official creditor committee announced that they agreed on the main parameters of a debt treatment with Sri Lanka consistent with those of Sri Lanka's extended fund facility arrangement with the IMF. According to the Ministry of Finance, the agreements in principle covers approximately $5.9 billion of outstanding public debt and consists of a mix of long-term maturity extensions and reduction in interest rates. Welcoming the agreement, IMF Senior Mission Chief for Sri Lanka, Peter Brewer, said these understandings paved the way for the IMF Executive Board to consider completion of the first review of Sri Lanka's 4-year extended fund facility arrangement, and added that they look forward to the Executive Board taking up this review by mid-December and the continuation of their productive collaboration with Sri Lanka in the period ahead.
Now, in keeping with the theme of Sri Lanka's macroeconomics, while highlighting the need for sustainable and inclusive growth and a healthy democracy, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe is of the view that both the central bank and the government may need to take harsh and unpopular decisions in a bid to ensure that the country's democracy is preserved. He made these comments while addressing the economic dialogue series organized by the German Federal Minister of Finance in Berlin recently under the theme Inflation Kills Democracy, Fiscal Rationality as the Basis of Functioning Communities. Speaking further, the central bank governor expressed confidence in maintaining the inflation rate between 4% to 6% as mentioned in the new central bank law.
We have a commitment. All the independents come with our mandate to deliver inflation. What called our target is 4 to 6%. The range, middle range is 5% for a country like us. This is the right level of inflation. Flexible inflation target regime is now formally recognized in the law as a monetary policy inflation regime. And no government intervention, no ability to finance budget deficits directly from the central bank, but we have independence as well as a stronger accountability. If we can't deliver our mandate, so we should be controlled parliament, public and everyone else. We are confident that we can maintain inflation within target. Under this framework, we have sufficient independence and instruments and ability to deliver our mandate. Central bank is the authority to maintain financial system stability under Sri Lankan law. That is why I imagine when exchange rate depreciated by 50%, interest rate going up 34%, the stability of financial system was at the very difficult situation. And with the domestic debt restructuring also. So we have been able to manage the situation. There is no single bank failures, even with this different periods, but there is some recapitalization recapitalization needs are there. There's commitment by the fiscal authorities to support recapitalization going forward, that we have a better understanding what are the needs. And other important part of the Sri Lankan economy, people who are familiar with, is corruption, vulnerabilities and the governance issues. Those are some of the issues that led to this kind of fiscal imbalances and indiscipline, lack of fiscal and other macro governance. First one is the central bank independence, and second part is the new anti-corruption law. There are several similar reforms in the pipeline, so that's an important pillar. Going forward, central bank and government may need to undertake harsh and unpopular measures that will ensure the democracy is preserved under the event going forward. That's where it's important to have sustainable and inclusive growth and healthy democracy. The macroeconomic stability, not only the inflation, overall stability is most important.
And now we take you to the latest in Parliament. During the parliamentary proceedings today, SJB MP Dr. Kavinda Jayawardena drew the attention of the House to the report of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry established to probe the Easter Sunday attacks, and claimed that the recommendations of the report have not been implemented by the relevant authorities. In response, Minister of Justice, Prison Affairs and Constitutional Reforms, President's Counsel Dr. Vijaydas Rajapaksa claimed that the opposition MP Dr. Kavinda Jayawardena is privy to certain facts unknown by the Attorney General and the courts, and invited the opposition MP to submit a written statement on those facts to the police. The Justice Minister guaranteed that such evidence will be used to exercise the law against any Sri Lankan, despite whatever office they hold in the country.
ඔක්තෝබර් අගවෙන විට මේ විෂමද්‍රව්‍ය සාම්පල් එවල තියෙනවා 10891ක්. මෙතෙන්දී ගරු නියෝජ්‍ය කතානායකතුමනි 1477ක කිසිදු මද්‍රව්‍යයක් නැහැ. මම මේක පෙරත් පොලිස්පතිතුමාට මහජන ආරක්ෂක ඇමතිතුමාට ලියලා තියෙනවා. මේක බරපතල ප්‍රශ්නයක්. ඒක පොලිසියෙන් ඇත්තටම හිතාමතා මේක කරනවද සත්භාවයෙන් කටයුතු කරාද කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙනවා. ඒක අපට උත්තරයක් දෙන්න අපිට බෑ. මේක ඇත්තටම සොයා ගන්න ඕන. අපිට සැක හිතන පොලිස් ස්ථාන සම්බන්ධව අපි හොයලා බැලුවා. මේ ව්‍යාජ ලෙස එවපු සාම්පල් වලින් වැල්ලම්පිටිය පොලිසිය වල තියෙනවා 67ක්. කඩුවෙල වල තියෙනවා 40ක්. මරදාන 35ක්. පෑලියගොඩ 28ක්. මෝදර 24ක්. මේ මිනිස්සු ඔක්කොම හිරේ ඉන්නේ. සමහරලාට අවුරුද්දක් ගියොත් එම රස පරීක්ෂක වාර්තා වෙන්න මේගොල්ලෝ හිරේ ඉන්න ඕනේ. ඉතින් මේක ගැන විශේෂ පරීක්ෂණයක්, විශේෂ අවධානයක් මහජන ආරක්ෂක අමාත්‍යාංශය විසින් යොමු කළ යුතුයි.
පාර්ලිමේන්තු බලතල හා වරප්‍රසාද පනත. මේ පනත තාම වළංගුද? මේ පනතේ ප්‍රතිපාදන තුට්ටු දෙකකටවත් ගණන් ගන්නේ නැතුව මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තු සභාගර්භය තුල අදහස් ප්‍රකාශ කිරීමට එරෙහිව අද අධිකරණ මේ ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙලා ඒ විතරක් නෙවෙයි ඒක කන්ටිනියු වෙනවා. අධිකරණයට නඩුවක් ඉදිරිපත් කරපුවාම අධිකරණයට බලයක් නැහැ ඒක බාර නොගෙන ඉන්න. ඒතකොට මේ බාර ගත්තට පස්සේ විරුද්ධ පාර්ශවය ඇවිල්ලා පෙන්නුවොත් මේ නඩුව බාර ගන්න අධිකරණයට අධිකරණ බලයක් නැහැ කියලා අධිකරණය ඒ පිළිබඳව විමර්ශනයක් කරලා මුලින් තීන්දුවක් දෙන්න ඕනේ. නිසා ඒ තත්වයට ඔය ගරු විපක්ෂ නායකතුමා මං හිතන්නේ සඳහන් කරන නඩුව ඒ තත්වයට තාම ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ. මේ පනත වළංගුයි මේ පනත යටතේ තියෙන වරප්‍රසාද සියලු දෙනාට තියෙනවා. ඒක කාටවත් උල්ලංඝනය කරන්න බෑ.
පාස්කු ඉරුදින ත්‍රස්ත ප්‍රහාරයට අපේ රටේ කතෝලික ජනතාව පත් වෙලා. ජනාධිපති විමර්ශන කොමිසමේ පැහැදිලිව සඳහන් වෙනවා මේ කණ්ඩායම් වලට මොකද්ද කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. නිර්දේශවල කියනවා මෙන්න මේ පුද්ගලයන්ට විරුද්ධව නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න කියලා. හැබැයි අපි දකිනවා නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන උදවිය අද අපෝසත් වෙලා තියෙනවා නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න. ඒ නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක නොකරන නිසා අද නීතියෙන් ගැලවිලා ඒ තනතුරු වල වැජබිලා ඉන්නවා.
මේ වන විට නීතිපතිතුමා නඩු 42ක් පවරලා තියෙනවා. ඒවට ඉන්නවා චූදිතයෝ 80ක්. එතකොට ප්‍රධාන නඩුව ට්‍රයල් ඇට් බාර් ත්‍රිපුජ්‍යල විනිශ්චයාසනයේ අසන ලබන නඩුව ප්‍රධාන චූදිතයෝ 25 දෙනාට විරුද්ධව නඩුව විමසමින් පවතිනවා. ඒ අතරතුර ගරු කාවින්ද ජයවර්ධන මන්ත්‍රීතුමා ඒකෙදි සලකා බලන්න ඕන සාක්ෂි ගණනාවක් කිව්වා. ඒ ඔබතුමාට ඇයි ওই ටික ගෙනහිලා උසා ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න බැරි? ඔබතුමා දන්නවා අපි නොදන්න නීතිපති නොදන්න අධිකරණයට ඉදිරිපත් වෙලා නැති කරුණ ඔබතුමා දන්නවා. ඔබතුමා මන්ත්‍රීවරයෙක් විදියට දැනගෙන වසන් කරගෙන ඉන්න එකත් මහා බරපතල අපරාධයක්. ඇයි ඔබතුමා ඕක අඩු ගානේ ලිඛිතව පොලිසියට දෙන්නේ නැත්තේ? දුන්නොත් එක්ක ඔබතුමා බොරු කිව්වයි කියලා ඔබතුමා හිරේ යනවට බයද? අපිට ඕන මේක ඇත්ත හෙළිදරව් කරගන්න. දැන් මේ මහමොලකාරයෙක් ඉන්නවනම් අපි හරි කැමැති මහමොලකාරය අල්ලලා එල්ලන්න. මේක මුලින්ම කවුද කිව්වේ? හිටපු නීතිපතිතුමා. දප්පුල ලිවේර මහත්තයා. කවද්ද මේක කිව්වේ? ඔහු විශ්‍රාම යන දවසේ හැන්දෑවේ. අවුරුදු 2කමාරක් තිස්සේ මේ ලිපිගොනු ටික අතගාලා අනලා ගෙදර යන දවසේ කියනවා මේකේ ඉන්නවා කියලා මහමොලකාරයෙක්. ඒකත් මම ඔන්න ඔබතුමාට ඇත්ත කියන්නම්. එතුමා අවුරුද්දක කාලයක් දික් කරන්න ඉල්ලුවා ගෝඨාභය ජනාධිපතිතුමාගෙන්. එතුමා කිව්වා නීතියට අනුව දික් කරන්න බෑ කියලා. ඒක නිසා එතුමා මාධ්‍යයට ප්‍රකාශයක් කරලා ගිනි තියලා ගියා. ඊට පස්සේ අපි පොලිස්පතිට කිව්වා හිටපු නීතිපති ගෙනල්ලා කට උත්තරයක් ගන්න කියලා. එතුමා මොකද්ද කරේ? උසාවි ගිහිල්ලා තහනම් නියෝගයක් කිල්ලන ඔයාගෙන් කට උත්තර ගන්න එපා කියලා. හිටපු නීතිපති තොරතුරු වසන් කරගෙන අධිකරණයෙන් ගිහිල්ලා සහනයක් ගන්නවා කට උත්තර ගන්න එපා කියලා. දැන් ඔබතුමාත් ඒකමනේ කරන්නේ. මම ඔබතුමාට සහතිකයක් දෙනවා. බාස්කු ඉරිදා පිළිබඳව ඔබතුමා ඕන සාක්ෂියක් ගෙනල්ලා දෙන්න. ඒ සාක්ෂිය මේ රටේ ඉන්න ඕන ජගතෙකුට විරුද්ධව වෙන්න පුළුවන්. අපි නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරනවා. පුළුවන් නම් ගෙනත් දෙන්න.
ඔබතුමාගේ පැහැදිලි කිරීම ප්‍රසිද්ධ කරපු තොරතුරු මේ ජනාධිපතිතුමාට දුන්න තොරතුරු ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ කාර්යාලයට අරපු තොරතුරු මේ ලියපු ඒවා තමයි මම කියුවේ. මොකද මේගොල්ලෝ මේවා ගරු සභාපතිතුමනේ ඇහෙන්නේ නැහනේ. ඇහෙන්නේ නැති හින්දා තමයි මේක කිව්වේ.
Now in other local news, an inmate of the Batticaloa prison has reportedly died after being attacked by a group of inmates. Meanwhile, 4 suspects who were wanted for a recent murder in Paliagota have been arrested by the police. With that, let's have a look at more news across the island in brief.
A 46-year-old inmate who was being held in remand custody at Batticaloa until the 28th of December has reportedly died after being attacked by a group of inmates. The victim was held by the authorities over the possession of illicit liquor. As per police reports, the 46-year-old was pronounced dead after being admitted to the Batticaloa hospital following a brawl with 8 other inmates. The cause of the death has been identified as blunt force trauma, while the police are yet to identify the inmates' assailants. Meanwhile, 4 suspects under suspicion of a murder committed in the Paliagota area have been arrested by the police. Accordingly, a sword and a machete were also found in the suspects' possession at the time of their arrest. Further investigations into the matter are currently being carried out by the Paliagota police. An armed gang who arrived at a house of a businessman in Navakkadu area in Putlam this morning had stolen 15 million rupees worth cash and jewellery. Accordingly, investigations into the matter are currently being conducted by the Kalpitiya police station.
Now in your top business story of the evening, with several macroeconomic implications, head of the state-owned enterprise restructuring unit Suresh Shah assured that none of the SOEs that are in the divestiture process have concerns pertaining to the country's national security. Addressing the Sri Lanka Economic Summit 2023 organized by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Shah explained the necessity of divesting state-owned enterprises to provide more welfare to the public.
The only difference between a government-owned entity and a private sector entity in terms of revenue to government comes through the dividends that a government-owned entity will pay the government. The profits of the entity does not belong to the shareholder, does not belong to the government. It's the dividends that the government gets from a state-owned entity that matters. So let's take the case of Sri Lanka Telecom. Over the last 10 years, on average, the annual dividends that SLT has paid government is just under $1 billion. Now, SLT today is listed on the stock exchange. Its market cap is 160 billion rupees. Government roughly has a 50% shareholding, slightly above 50%, but let's take 50%. So if government were to sell SLT today at its market cap, at its market value, government will earn 80 billion rupees, will get 80 billion rupees on the sale. You put that at 10% interest, and per year, government gets 8 billion rupees per annum. 8 billion as against the dividend of less than $1 billion, 8 times more. And just think what government can do with the additional 7 billion that it will earn per year. The number of hospital beds that can be added on to the healthcare system, the number of schools, the laboratories in schools, and so on and so forth, the infrastructure, the road network, the rail network, and so on and so forth. So this is just one example. What then is the basis on which we need to decide between state control of a public commercial enterprise and private sector control? There are 3 reasons. The first reason is national security consideration. And believe me, in none of the SOEs that we are looking at the moment is there a national security concern. If an enterprise does not fall into these 3 buckets, national security, a development need, and market failure, then there is no need for government to retain control of these enterprises, and they can be divested. We've created an SOE policy. That policy has been approved at Cabinet, and now we are transferring that SOE policy into a piece of legislation which hopefully will go to Parliament soon and have the approval of Parliament.
Now, some economists are of the view that even though tax policies may discourage investments in the short run, it is essential to India's growth in the long run. Today, we have economist and executive director of the Vimansa Initiative, Lakshman Sirivadana, joining us on our segment Understanding Taxes in Sri Lanka.
spite of these negatives of such policies, we have no other option but to go for a revenue enhancing measures which are initially painful and to some extent investment discouraging in the current economic situation. However, all these measures are intended in the final analysis in the medium and long term to generate economic growth which will be associated with increased private and public investment. But due to the revenue constraints, most of the growth will have to be realized through local and foreign private investment. Therefore, finally, the government intention is to create an environment suitable for attracting local and foreign investment. In spite of its intention to have a solid macroeconomic conditions conducive to investment and a tax regime which will generate sufficient revenue for the government, I can see a much more serious aspect that has to be addressed to achieve this. That is corruption by the government, political levels as well as bureaucratic levels, so that the local and foreign investors will see a country with an environment suitable for investment. There are several government institutions that have been created implementing policies, having discretionary regulatory authority to protect environment, regularize urban development and various other aspects relating to an investment project. In each of these institutions, if they become a corruption or lethargic or inefficient organization, how can we expect the good tax policies or macroeconomic policies to create investment, which in the final analysis lead to growth and employment creation? As far as I can see, up to now, most, if not all these institutions have become toll gates where new initiative comes, it is becoming a stumbling block which can be overcome only through bribery or top-level political intervention. That should not be the way.
Now, meanwhile, Sri Lanka's business sentiment has plummeted to a 15-month low off the back of looming tax hikes and challenges in the external front as conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East affect Sri Lanka's key exports. These revelations were made by the LMD Nielsen IQ BCI, Sri Lanka's only barometer of business confidence. Making forecasts for 2024, the LMD predicted a turbulent year ahead.
The LMD Nielsen IQ BCI, Sri Lanka's only barometer of business sentiment, was plummeted by 17 basis points in November to register 58, a 15-month low. The index value of the preceding month stood at 75 basis points. The drop in November marks the first instance since July last year that the index has fallen below the 60 basis points threshold. The LMD highlights that the looming increase in value-added tax by an additional 3% to 18% from the 1st of January 2024 is at the top of the pile of sensitivities that could drive business confidence in the near term. In addition, the LMD also points out that Sri Lanka's fiscal goals present a challenging landscape as the projected primary account deficit of 0.6% of GDP contrasts with the IMF's requirement to achieve a primary surplus of 2.3% by 2025, with a mandate to reduce the debt of GDP ratio to 95% by 2032. On the external front, the ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza continue to undermine any prospect of a global economic revival, and this in return is affecting Sri Lanka's exports, particularly the crucial apparel industry. Making projections for the year ahead, the authors of the Business Confidence Barometer stated that the doom and gloom that surrounds Sri Lankan elections may reappear on the horizon together with resurgence of political instability and potentially uncertainty about the outcome of the polls. Thus, the LMD predicted a turbulent year ahead.
Now, state-run domestic gas supplier Litrogas Lanka announced that no price hikes will be imposed for the month of December this year. The decision was made considering the upcoming festive season. Issuing a press release, Litro Chairman Mudita Piri stated that despite the price fluctuations in the global market and current exchange rates of the US dollar, the gas prices for December remain unchanged. As such, the 12.5 kilogram gas cylinder will continue to be sold at 3,565 rupees, while the 5 kilogram cylinder will be sold at 1,431 rupees. Meanwhile, the price of a 2.3 kilogram cylinder remains at 668 rupees. Now, in a special government notification issued by President Ranil Wickremesinghe in his capacity as the Minister of Finance, it was stated that a special commodity levy has been imposed on a number of goods with effect from yesterday. The order, made under the provisions of Section 2 of the Special Commodity Levy Act No. 48 of 2007, will be in place until the 31st of December next year. Accordingly, yogurt, butter, dates, grapes, apples, fish and big onions are among the taxed items. Now, in your latest corporate developments, Sampath Bank PLC announced a new member to its board of directors under the recommendations of the Board of Nominations and Governance Committee following the necessary regulatory approvals. In the meantime, renowned British-Australian Michelin star celebrity chef Gary Megan is on a week-long visit to Sri Lanka for a special culinary 3-day event. With that, let's take a look at our corporate news segment for the evening.
Sampath Bank PLC, the third largest private bank in Sri Lanka, announced the appointment of Prabhash Subasinghe to its board of directors with effect from the 1st of December 2023. This decision, ratified during the board meeting on the 30th of November 2023, was made under the recommendation of the Board Nominations and Governance Committee following the necessary regulatory approvals, including the approval from the Director of Bank Supervision Department from the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Prabhash Subasinghe, a distinguished entrepreneur with a track record of rapid success in building global companies, brings with him a wealth of experience and leadership. Renowned British-Australian Michelin star celebrity chef and much-famed former original judge of MasterChef Australia, Gary Megan, is on a week-long visit to Sri Lanka for a special 3-day culinary event. A 5-course dinner was hosted last evening at the Cinnamon Grand Atrium with the menu curated by Gary Megan himself. He was expected to cook 2 dinners alongside several Sri Lankan chefs on the 30th of November and today at the Cinnamon Grand Hotel in Colombo. In the meantime, the Board of Directors of Maravilla Resorts PLC have decided to convene an extraordinary general meeting in terms of Section 220 of the Companies Act No. 7 of 2007. In its corporate disclosure dated yesterday, the company informed that the EGM was called as the net assets of the company are less than half of its stated capital. The company further disclosed that the date, time and venue of the meeting will be notified via a further announcement to the Colombo Stock Exchange in due course.
We wrap up tonight's edition of AdaDerana First at 9. Stay in touch with us on www.adaderana.lk for the latest developments around the clock. Thank you. Have a great night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.